So my opponent talks about the overpopulation problem with the death penalty and how it does not solve the problem of the overpopulation. But I have a quote from Ayers Crystal from Vitana.org, which explains that in the United States there are more than 2.3 million people being held in state and federal prisons, local jails, Indian country jails, juvenile correctional facilities, immigration detention centers, military prisons, and civil commitment centers. So, and also, she goes into more depth saying that about 443,000 people have not been convicted of anything and are awaiting trial. Another 41,000 are in detention in immigration centers without conviction. On the other hand, 704,000 prisoners are labeled as violent offenders in state prisons. Capital punishment laws create space for potential rehabilitation without dealing with issues of prison population. So this this quote explains why the problem of the death penalty, of it being overpopulating the jails with these criminals, is actually false. And my opponent also made the claim that the death penalty is immoral. But I have a quote from deathpenalty.procon.org explains that perhaps most importantly, in its supreme gravity, the death penalty promotes this belief in and respect for the majesty of the moral order and for the system of human law that both derives from and supports that moral order. And also, to put it another way, to sentence killers like those described above to less than death would fail to do justice, because the penalty, presumably a longer period in prison, would be grossly disproportionate to the heinousness of the crime. And one more quote from deathpenalty.procon.org: we reserve the death penalty in the United States for the most heinous murders and the most brutal and conscienceless murders. This is not, as some critics argue, a kind of state-run lottery that randomly chooses an unlucky few for the ultimate penalty from among all those convicted of murder. Rather than the capital punishment system is a filter that selects the worst of the worst. Now, another claim that the claim that they're making of that it is strict and inhumane, and they also mentioned that most countries have strict and humane ways of execution, so that we relate to these other countries using the death penalty, when actually other countries use more inhumane ways of execution, such as beheading and torturous ways of executing someone. Like countries, according to deathpenaltyworldwide.org, the countries that authorize beheading are Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen. So we cannot agree with the claim that we relate to these other countries when their ways of execution are a lot more inhumane than we do, as we mean for it to be painless. Also, another quote from the same source: there are 9 common methods of execution that other countries use, which are hanging, shooting by firing squad, beheading, lethal injection, stoning, gas chamber, electrocution, and falling from an unknown height. So as you can see, that these are actually other inhumane ways of execution.